was a bright morning in the city. The streets were busy with cars and people moving quickly to their work. Among them was a young woman named Anna. She was in a wheelchair and her condition made people notice her. Anna was also pregnant, and her careful movements showed that she was taking extra care of herself. She had a gentle smile on her face as she pushed the wheels slowly, enjoying the warmth of the sun. Anna was going to the nearby store to buy some small things for the house. She lived with her husband David in a quiet part of town. Most people who met David knew he was a calm man who never liked trouble. What they did not know was that David worked for the FBI. He kept his identity quiet because his job demanded silence and care. Anna often felt safe because she trusted her husband's protection. But this morning she had gone out alone. David had left early for some office duty, and she wanted to handle some shopping herself. She rolled her wheelchair along the sidewalk, humming softly, and stopped near a shop to look at fruits displayed in baskets. Just then, a policeman walked toward the same area. His name was Officer Mark. He was known in the neighborhood for his strict ways, but many people also felt he was harsh and sometimes unfair. He had a short temper and small things often made him angry. That morning, Mark was already upset because of an earlier argument with another driver on the road. When Officer Mark saw Anna near the shop, his eyes narrowed. For some reason, he thought she was blocking the way. Instead of asking politely, he raised his voice. "Move aside," he said sharply, pointing at her wheelchair. "You cannot stay here." Anna looked up, surprised at his tone. She calmly replied, "Sir, I'm just buying some fruits. I will not be long." But Mark's mood was bad. He felt she was not listening to his order. He stepped closer and repeated in a louder voice, "I told you to move now." People nearby turned their heads. Some whispered that the officer was being too harsh. Anna's hands trembled on the wheels, but she stayed firm. "Please, I am not disturbing anyone. Let me finish and I will go." Mark's anger grew. His pride did not let him step back. He thought the woman was challenging his authority. He put his hand on her wheelchair and shook it roughly. Anna gasped, her face pale with fear. "Do not argue with me," Mark said, his eyes burning with anger. The crowd around them grew silent. No one dared to step forward, though many felt the officer was wrong. Anna held her stomach protectively. Her heart raced and tears formed in her eyes. She had never imagined such treatment from someone who wore the uniform of law. At that very moment, David returned from his short meeting nearby. He was walking down the street when he saw a crowd forming. His sharp eyes noticed the center of the scene. When he saw his wife in the wheelchair, held roughly by a policeman, his blood ran cold. David quickened his pace. His calm face turned hard and his strong steps echoed on the pavement. People made way for him as if they felt his presence carried weight. He reached the spot and stood directly in front of Officer Mark. "What are you doing to my wife?" David asked in a deep voice. His eyes locked on the officer with a piercing look. Mark stepped back slightly but then raised his chin. "This woman was blocking the way and disobeying my order." David placed his hand on the wheelchair gently, calming Anna. She looked at him with relief. He then turned to Mark, his voice steady but sharp. "You should know who you are speaking to, officer." Mark frowned. He did not like being questioned, especially in front of people. "And who might you be?" he asked with sarcasm. David's eyes grew colder. He leaned closer, his voice low but strong enough for all to hear. "I am her husband. And I am an agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." A hush fell over the crowd. Whispers spread like fire. Everyone stared at the officer who had just mishandled a pregnant woman in a wheelchair, not knowing her husband was someone with great authority. Officer Mark's face turned pale. For the first time that day, he felt his own position shaking. Anna held David's hand tightly, grateful that he had come at the right moment. The story of this morning was only beginning, but the silence in that street already spoke louder than words. The street grew quiet after David's words. Everyone who stood nearby could feel the weight in the air. The officer had raised his hand against a pregnant woman in a wheelchair, and now he stood face to face with a man who introduced himself as an FBI agent. Officer Mark's face turned stiff. He tried to hide his nervousness, but his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "I was only doing my duty. She was blocking the way. People should not make excuses even if they are weak or ill." The crowd gasped at his words. They could not believe how coldly he spoke. David's hand stayed firm on Anna's shoulder, steadying her as she clutched her stomach. He looked straight into the officer's eyes, his calm but sharp voice cutting through the silence. "Your duty is to protect, not to harm. You touched my wife without reason. Do you even realize what you have done?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, but his pride did not allow him to step back. "I follow the law," he said, his jaw tight. David's voice grew colder. "You broke it," the crowd began to murmur. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Others shook their heads, whispering about the shame of a policeman behaving this way. Anna looked up at David, her face pale but full of trust. She whispered softly, "Please do not let this go." Her words gave David even more strength. David straightened his back, his calm nature now covered with authority. He pulled out his badge from his coat pocket and held it up. The shiny emblem caught the sunlight, and the people around leaned closer to see it. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," David said clearly. "I am Special Agent David." A wave of shock spread through the street. Phones kept recording. People looked at the officer, waiting for his reaction. Mark's confidence broke for a moment. His eyes widened and his lips parted as if he wanted to explain, but no words came out. He had thought he was dealing with just another civilian. Now he realized his mistake was far greater, but instead of apologizing, Mark grew defensive. His pride refused to bow down. "Even if you are an agent, you cannot interfere with my duty," he said, though his voice was less firm than before. David stepped closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over the officer. "Your duty ended when you raised your hand against a defenseless woman. You are in uniform, yet you forgot your oath. Do not try to cover it with false words," the crowd cheered softly, agreeing with David. Some clapped while others called out, "He is right." Mark's face burned with shame, but his stubbornness kept him standing. He looked at Anna, then back at David. His throat felt dry and sweat rolled down his forehead. David lowered his voice but made sure every word carried weight. "You will answer for this. You thought no one was watching. You thought you could act with power against the weak. But the law is bigger than you. And I am the law's servant," the word struck hard. Mark's eyes darted around, seeing all the people watching him, recording every second. His authority was slipping from his hands, and the eyes of judgment pressed against him like a heavy stone. Anna placed her hand on David's arm. Her strength was weak, but her spirit was strong. She whispered, "Take me home. I need rest." David nodded, then turned his eyes back to Mark. "This is not over. I will see you again, not on this street, but in the place where real justice is served." Mark swallowed hard, unable to reply. David slowly moved Anna's wheelchair away from the crowd. The people made way, some patting David on the back, others smiling at Anna to give her courage. She held David's hand tightly as they left the street behind. But as they moved, David's mind was not calm. His thoughts burned with determination. This was no small matter. A man in uniform had misused his power and almost harmed his wife and unborn child. That could not be forgiven. When they reached their car, David carefully helped Anna inside. She leaned back, closing her eyes, breathing slowly. David started the engine, his face hard with silent promise. He knew this was the beginning of a larger fight. Officer Mark would have to answer not only for his actions, but also for the disrespect he showed to the very meaning of law. As the car drove away, the crowd's voices still echoed in the distance. People would speak about this day and the truth would spread, and in David's heart a vow was made. He would protect his family and make sure justice was served, no matter what it took. The drive home was quiet. Anna rested her head against the seat, her hands folded on her stomach. She tried to stay calm, but her heart still raced when she remembered how the officer had shaken her wheelchair. David kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight with determination. He had never been the kind of man to lose control, but he also never ignored injustice. When they reached home, David carefully helped Anna out of the car and guided her inside. She gave him a small smile, trying to hide her worry. "I am fine," she said softly. "But please do not let this matter disappear. He cannot treat people this way." David nodded firmly. "I promise you, Anna, this will not disappear. The law will see it." He made sure she was comfortable, placing a blanket over her and bringing her a glass of water. Then he sat down at the table, his mind already working like the agent he was trained to be. His thoughts were sharp, moving step by step. First, he replayed everything that had happened in his mind. The officer's anger, The rough hand on the wheelchair, the crowd's reaction, the videos being recorded. He knew there were witnesses. He knew there was proof. That gave him strength. David took out his phone and made a call to a close colleague in the bureau named Paul. Paul had worked with him for years and was known for his honesty. "Paul, it is David," he said when his friend answered. "Something serious happened today. A policeman attacked my wife in public. I need official records from that area, and I want to know if the department has received complaints about this man before." Paul's voice was serious. "Give me the name." "Officer Mark," David replied. There was silence for a moment before Paul said, "I have heard about him. His name came up before." "You may be right, David. Let me check. I will call you back soon." David ended the call and leaned back in his chair. His eyes were steady and his mind was ready. He was not only a husband but also an officer of the law. If someone misused the badge, it was his duty to bring the truth forward. While waiting, he walked back to Anna. She was resting, her eyes half closed, but when she saw him, she whispered, "Do not let anger guide you. Let justice guide you." Her words reminded David of his training. Justice was not about revenge. It was about truth and fairness. He kissed her forehead gently. "Do not worry. Justice will guide me." After some time, his phone rang again. It was Paul. "I checked the system," Paul said. "There are already 2 complaints filed against this officer for using unnecessary force. Both were dismissed due to lack of evidence. But with your statement plus the videos from today, this will be different." David's eyes sharpened. "Thank you, Paul. Save everything you find. We will need it soon." That evening, David began collecting evidence. He contacted a few people who had been present during the incident. Some had already posted short clips online, and others agreed to share the full recordings with him. Each video showed clearly how Officer Mark had behaved. One man from the crowd came forward saying, "I will give my statement. I saw everything. What he did was wrong." Another woman said he scared everyone. No one wanted to step forward because he was in uniform, but we all knew it was wrong. David thanked them. He made sure to collect names, numbers, and every video file. His training taught him the importance of building a strong case step by step. Late at night, after Anna had fallen asleep, David sat at his desk with his laptop open. He placed the videos in order, writing down every detail. The officer's words, his actions, the way he shook the wheelchair, the way Anna cried out in fear. Each piece of evidence became a stone in the wall David was building. By the time the clock passed midnight, David closed the laptop. His eyes were tired, but his heart was steady. He knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, he would file an official complaint, backed with evidence that could not be ignored. As he turned off the lights and walked quietly to Anna's side, he looked at her peaceful face. She trusted him completely, and he could not fail her. The road to justice had started, and David was ready to walk it with unshakable will. Morning light filled the living room as David prepared for the day. His mind was clear, his heart steady. The videos, the witness names, and the complaints Paul had found gave him confidence. Today, he would take the first official step to bring justice. Anna sat on the sofa, watching him put files into a neat folder. Her hands rested gently on her stomach. She gave him a calm smile, though her eyes showed worry. "Be careful, David. When powerful people are challenged, they often push back harder." David knelt beside her and held her hand. "I know, but I cannot let fear guide us. If we stay silent, men like him will keep harming others. This is not only for us, Anna. It is for everyone who suffered in silence." She nodded softly. "I trust you." David left the house with a strong stride, driving toward the central police station. The building stood tall, its stone walls and high windows giving it a heavy presence. People walked in and out, some in uniform, some in plain clothes. David parked his car, picked up his folder, and walked inside. The reception area was busy. Officers moved quickly, answering phones and carrying documents. David walked straight to the counter. "I need to file a complaint against Officer Mark," he said firmly. The officer at the desk looked up, surprised. "And who are you?" David opened his folder and held out his badge. "Special Agent David, FBI, this is official." The officer's eyes widened. He immediately stood straighter. "Yes, sir. Please follow me." David was led into a small office. A senior officer soon entered the room, his expression serious but polite. "I am Captain Lewis. I was told you want to file a complaint." David nodded and placed the folder on the table. Yesterday, your officer, Mark, used unnecessary force against my wife. She is pregnant and in a wheelchair. He shook her chair and raised his voice without reason. The crowd witnessed it and many recorded it. Captain Lewis's brows furrowed. Are you certain about this? David opened the folder and pushed the papers forward. These are witness statements. These are videos recorded by civilians. And these are previous complaints against the same officer. I want this case to be taken seriously. Captain Lewis looked through the documents carefully. His face grew tense as he watched a short clip on David's laptop. The video clearly showed Officer Mark shaking the wheelchair, Anna's frightened expression, and David's confrontation. This is strong evidence, Captain Lewis admitted. I will forward it to the Internal Affairs Division immediately. But you should know, Agent David, cases against officers are often complicated. There will be pressure to cover it up. David leaned forward, his voice calm but filled with authority. I am ready for pressure. I have lived through worse. What I cannot accept is silence. Captain Lewis studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. Leave this with me. I promise you I will not bury it. David stood and shook his hand firmly. Thank you. I will be watching closely. As David left the office, he noticed whispers among the staff. Some looked nervous, others curious. The news of his complaint was already spreading. He walked out of the station with steady steps, knowing the first move had been made. Later that afternoon, Officer Mark sat in his patrol car outside a small diner. His phone buzzed with a message. When he opened it, his hand shook. It was a notice to appear before the Internal Affairs Division. His stomach tightened. He knew why. Mark slammed his fist against the steering wheel. That man, he muttered bitterly. He had not expected the stranger to be an FBI agent. Now his career was in danger. Inside the bureau office, David updated Paul about the complaint. Paul nodded with approval. You did the right thing. Now the process begins. But be ready, David, he will not go down quietly. David's eyes hardened. Neither will I. That night, when David returned home, Anna was waiting for him. He told her everything. She listened quietly, then said, This is bigger than us now. People will be watching. You must be strong. Not just for me, but for everyone who believes in justice. David took her hand and held it tightly. I will not fail. The first stone had been placed in the wall of justice. But David knew the battle had only begun. Behind the uniform of Officer Mark was a storm of pride and fear, and storms never ended quietly. The next morning began with heavy clouds over the city. David sat at the dining table sipping black coffee while reading the news on his phone. The incident was already spreading. Several videos of the confrontation had gone online. Headlines spoke of a policeman rough with a disabled pregnant woman, not knowing her husband was an FBI agent. The comments were loud and people were demanding action. Anna read over his shoulder, her brows drawn with worry. This will put you in the spotlight, she said softly. Are you ready for that? David set his phone down and gave her a steady look. Truth cannot hide forever. If the spotlight is needed to show it, then so be it. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Officer Mark sat in a small room at the station. His eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night. Papers lay scattered on the desk in front of him. The notice from Internal Affairs still rested there, its words heavy in his mind. He leaned back in his chair, muttering to himself. One mistake, and now they all turn against me. His pride burned inside him. Instead of regret, anger filled his heart. He saw David not as a man protecting his wife, but as an enemy who wanted to ruin his career. Mark's phone buzzed with a call from a fellow officer. I saw the videos, Mark, the voice said. This looks bad. People are talking. You should prepare yourself. Mark clenched his jaw. I will not fall because of one man. I will fight this. He hung up and slammed the phone on the desk. He knew the investigation could take weeks, but his anger was already boiling. At the same time, David arrived at the FBI office to meet Paul. Paul handed him a folder. Internal Affairs has officially opened a case. Your evidence is solid, but expect resistance. The department will not want their officer's name dragged through the mud without a fight. David nodded. Let them resist. I am ready. Paul leaned closer. Just be careful. Mark is hot-tempered. Men like him sometimes strike back when cornered. David's eyes narrowed. If he comes near my family again, he will regret it. Later that day, David took Anna for a short walk in the park. He wanted her to breathe fresh air and relax her mind. She moved gently in her wheelchair, smiling faintly at the sound of children playing nearby. For a brief moment, the world seemed calm, but calm never lasted long when storms gathered. Across the park, a dark car stood parked. Inside, Mark sat watching them. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. He felt his pride breaking more with every headline, every whisper. Seeing Anna and David together, looking peaceful, only fueled his fury. Mark muttered under his breath, "You think you have won, Agent, but I will not let you destroy me." He started his engine and drove away before anyone noticed, but his mind was already planning his next move. That evening, David received a call from Captain Lewis. "Agent David, I want you to know the case is moving forward, but there is pressure from above. Some people in the department want to protect Officer Mark. They are saying the videos do not show the full story. They claim you exaggerated." David's voice was calm but sharp. "I was there. The truth is clear. If they want to test me, I will bring more witnesses. I will not stop," Captain Lewis sighed. "I believe you, but you should know this will not be easy. Mark has friends inside the force." After the call, David sat in silence. He looked at Anna, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen with slow, careful movements. She noticed his quiet face and asked, "What is it?" "They will fight back," he answered. "This is no longer just about one man. It is about a system that protects its own, even when they are wrong." Anna rolled closer, placing her hand over his. "Then you must be stronger than the system. You must not let them break you." Her words gave him strength once more. That night, David checked the locks of every window and door before going to bed. His instincts told him Mark would not stay quiet. Far away, Mark sat alone in his car again, the city lights shining on his tense face. He whispered to himself, "If he wants war, I will give him war." The storm was no longer just building. It was about to strike. The following days brought an uneasy silence. On the surface, life looked calm for David and Anna. She spent her mornings reading in the living room, resting her hands gently on her stomach. David worked on his reports, staying close to her whenever he could. But under that calm, both of them felt something heavy, like a storm waiting just outside their door. David's instincts, sharpened by years in the bureau, told him they were being watched. He often caught sight of unfamiliar cars parked near the corner of their street. The drivers never stayed long, but their presence was too frequent to be chance. One evening, as the sun was setting, David stood by the window, watching the street carefully. Anna wheeled up beside him and asked softly, "You see it too, don't you?" David nodded. "Yes, Mark is not waiting for the investigation to finish. He is already planning something." Anna's hand touched his arm. "What will you do?" "Stay alert," David replied, "and protect you. Always." That night, David checked the locks again and placed a small camera near the front door. He sent a message to Paul explaining what he had noticed. Paul replied quickly, "I will send someone to patrol near your house. Do not let your guard down." The next day, David drove Anna to her doctor's appointment. On their way back, he noticed a black car following them for several streets. He slowed down, then turned sharply into another road. The car turned as well. David's jaw tightened. Anna noticed his expression. "Is it him?" she asked in a whisper. "Most likely," David answered, "but he will not catch us off guard." He accelerated suddenly, weaving through traffic. At the next intersection, he pulled into a small parking lot near a crowded store. The black car drove past, unable to follow without drawing attention. David exhaled slowly, but his eyes stayed sharp. "This is only the beginning," he muttered. That evening, Paul visited their home. He listened carefully as David explained the situation. "If Mark is following you, then he is desperate," Paul said. "Desperate men are dangerous. I will push the bureau to give you temporary protection." Anna looked worried, but David gave her a reassuring smile. "Do not be afraid. Fear is what he wants. We will not give it to him." Over the next few days, Mark's anger only grew stronger. Each headline about him, each video that spread online felt like a knife to his pride. He sat alone in his apartment, staring at the walls, muttering to himself, "He thinks he can destroy me. He thinks his badge is stronger than mine." His phone rang. It was a fellow officer warning him. "Mark, the internal affairs team is building a case. They have too much proof. You might lose your badge." Mark's fist slammed on the table. "No, I will not lose everything because of him. If he wants a fight, he will get one." Meanwhile, David grew more careful. He adjusted his daily routes, avoided quiet streets, and kept Anna close at all times. But he also prepared. He checked his firearm, ensured the security system worked, and stayed in contact with Paul every day. One night, as rain poured outside, David sat at his desk, writing his report for the bureau. Suddenly the lights flickered. He rose to his feet, scanning the house. The front camera showed nothing unusual, but his instincts told him they were not alone. Anna, who had been resting, called out softly, "David, what happened?" "Stay where you are," David said firmly, moving toward the window. He pulled the curtain slightly. Across the street, he saw a figure standing under a tree, watching their home. The figure moved away when the rain grew heavier, disappearing into the night, but the image burned into David's mind. He had no doubt it was Mark. When he returned to Anna, she looked at him with worried eyes. "Was it him?" "Yes," David replied quietly. "He is not giving up, but neither will I." He sat beside her, holding her hand. "This fight is no longer only about us. It is about right and wrong. If he tries to bring shadows into our home, we will shine a brighter light." Anna squeezed his hand, her strength quiet but strong. "I believe in you." David knew the days ahead would not be easy. Mark had crossed the line from anger to obsession, and obsessed men often made reckless moves. The storm was no longer outside the city. It was standing right on their doorstep. The rain cleared the next morning, but the air around David's home still felt heavy. He prepared breakfast for Anna, placing a plate of toast and fruit before her. She smiled faintly, though her eyes carried worry. "You barely slept last night," she said gently. David sat down across from her. "Sleep can wait. What matters is keeping you safe." Anna reached for his hand. "We cannot live in fear forever. Something has to end this." Her words were true, and David knew it. He felt the pressure building. The investigation was moving slowly, but Mark's presence was fast and dangerous. Later that day, David received a call from Paul. "I have news," Paul said. "Internal Affairs will question Mark tomorrow. They already have the videos and complaints. It looks bad for him." David's voice was steady. "That means he has 1 day left to make his move." "He will not go quietly," Paul agreed. "Be careful. Keep your eyes open tonight." As evening fell, the streets grew quiet. David double-checked the locks, the cameras, and the lights around the house. He kept his firearm within reach but prayed he would not need it. Anna sat in the living room, a book in her lap, though her eyes barely moved over the pages. She sensed the storm that was coming. "David," she whispered, "if he comes, do not take risks. Think of me and our child." David gave her a calm nod. "I will think of you both. That is why I cannot let him win." Hours passed in silence. Then near midnight, the motion sensor outside triggered a faint light. David's body stiffened. He moved to the window and saw a shadow crossing the yard. The figure moved slowly, trying to stay hidden, but David's trained eyes recognized the shape. It was Mark. David's voice was low but firm. "Anna, go to the back room and lock the door." She looked at him with fear but obeyed. "Please be careful." Once she was safe, David stood by the front door, waiting. A heavy knock came. "Open up," Mark's voice called. It was sharp and angry, carrying no respect. David did not open. "Leave now, Mark. This is not the place for you." But Mark pushed harder. "You ruined me. You spread lies. You think your badge makes you better than me?" His voice cracked with rage. David kept calm. "The truth ruined you, not me. You brought this on yourself." Suddenly the door shook as Mark tried to force it open. David pulled his firearm from its holster but kept it lowered. He did not want blood. He wanted control. "Do not make a bigger mistake, Mark," David warned. "Walk away before it is too late." But Mark was blinded by anger. He finally managed to push the door halfway open. His uniform was soaked with sweat, his eyes wild. "I will not walk away." "You will pay for this." At that moment, bright lights flashed outside. Sirens screamed down the street. Several cars stopped in front of the house, and men in dark jackets jumped out. Paul stepped forward, his voice loud. "Mark, step back. Internal Affairs and FBI agents are here. This is over." Mark froze, caught between rage and fear. His eyes darted from David to the men outside. For a moment he seemed ready to charge forward, but then he dropped his shoulders. The fight had been taken from his hands. David kept his firearm steady. "Drop your pride, Mark, it is finished." With a deep growl, Mark stepped back and raised his hands. The agents rushed forward, placing him in handcuffs. His face twisted with anger as he shouted, This is not justice. You set me up. Paul shook his head firmly. No, Mark, you set yourself up. As they dragged him toward the cars, David finally lowered his firearm. He closed the door slowly and leaned against it, his body heavy with relief. Anna came out from the back room, her face pale. Is it over? She asked softly. David wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Yes, it is over. You are safe. Tears filled her eyes, not of fear but of relief. She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. Outside, the flashing lights began to fade as the cars drove away with Mark inside. Justice had finally caught him, and the shadow over their home was lifted. But David knew the final step was still ahead. The court would decide Mark's fate. For now, though, his family was safe, and that was all that mattered. The morning of the trial was calm, but the weight of the day pressed heavily on David and Anna. The city courthouse stood tall and gray, its wide steps filled with reporters, officers, and curious onlookers. Everyone waited to see what would happen to Officer Mark, whose actions had shaken trust and caused fear. David arrived in a dark suit, guiding Anna carefully up the steps. She was still in her wheelchair, her pregnancy more visible now, but her face carried quiet strength. People whispered as they passed, recognizing her as the woman at the center of the case. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was serious. The judge sat high on the bench, watching the room with sharp eyes. Mark sat at the defense table, his face pale but still holding stubborn pride. He wore a suit, but the handcuffs around his wrists reminded everyone of the truth. Anna sat close to David, her hands resting on her stomach. She whispered, "No matter what happens, we already won. We stood against him." David gave her a small nod. "Yes, but justice must be clear. He cannot hurt anyone else again." The trial began with the prosecutor presenting evidence. Videos of Mark's attack on Anna were shown, along with testimonies from neighbors who had seen his aggressive behavior. A doctor spoke about the stress Anna suffered, warning how dangerous it could have been for her and the baby. Then Paul was called as a witness. Standing tall in his uniform, he explained how the FBI became involved after hearing of David's connection and the seriousness of the case. He told the court how Mark had tried to intimidate witnesses and even returned to the house despite warnings. His words were steady, leaving no doubt about the danger Mark posed. When Mark's lawyer spoke, he tried to argue that Mark had acted in stress, that he had been provoked, and that he was loyal to his duty. But the evidence was too strong. The courtroom could see that this was not a mistake. It was a choice fueled by pride and anger. Finally, David was asked to testify. He walked to the stand with calm steps. When the prosecutor asked why he had pursued the case so strongly, David looked directly at the judge and answered, "Because the law is meant to protect, not to harm. My wife deserves safety, not fear. If we let men like him walk free, then justice means nothing." The courtroom fell silent. His words carried weight not only as an FBI agent, but as a husband and father-to-be. After hours of arguments, the judge called for order. His voice was firm as he delivered the decision. "Officer Mark is found guilty of assault, abuse of power, and unlawful entry. He will serve prison time, and he will no longer serve as a policeman." The room buzzed with whispers, some shocked, some relieved. Mark slammed his hands on the table, but the guards quickly pulled him back. His face twisted with anger as he was taken away, his eyes glaring at David and Anna for the last time. But his power was gone, his threats now only empty words. Anna's eyes filled with tears as she turned to David. "It is finished," she whispered. David placed his arm around her shoulders. "Yes, justice is done." As they left the courtroom, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but David guided Anna past them calmly. He did not need to speak to the world. His actions and the verdict had already spoken enough. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bright and warm. Anna breathed deeply, feeling as if a great weight had lifted. She looked at David with a soft smile. "Now we can finally look forward, not back." David nodded, holding her hand tightly. "We will raise our child in peace. That is all I want." Weeks later, life began to settle. The news slowly faded and the city moved on to other stories. For David and Anna, the focus turned to their growing family. The house felt safe again, filled with the sound of hope instead of fear. One quiet evening, as Anna rested on the porch, David joined her with 2 cups of tea. They sat side by side, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and gold. Anna touched her stomach and whispered, "Our child will grow in a world where justice still matters." "That is your gift to us." David smiled softly, placing his hand over hers. "And your courage made it possible." The wind carried their silence, but it was a silence of peace, not fear. Together they looked forward to a new chapter, one built on strength, love, and the victory of truth. The shadow of Mark was gone. What remained was the light of family, hope, and justice served.